I'm Andrew Gibbons. I always say that, and I always say Rebecca Norton's here because Rebecca Norton's always here. Today we're going to talk about line management involvement in, well, in my case recently, a management development program, but it could be anything involving development of individuals, plural or singular, but about line managers and their critical stakeholder importance in what we do. Rebecca, you've promised to have some difficult questions for me.
I have indeed, yes, thank you very much. I think this is really interesting concept, having line managers involved in this. So was this something that was part of the project right from the outset, that line managers were going to be involved?
Yeah, it was in this case, because here we're talking about a management development program that I'm doing with a client in various countries, China, Sweden, the US, and the Czech Republic. And it required a mix of individual coaching contact and small group work, as small as two in a group sometimes, to share into to process learning. So there's a definite design to it, and I put a lot of thought into it. And within that design process, I'll try and keep this tight, it was a priority issue of working with line managers from the outset, the very first thing. And that's what I've been doing, talking with line managers about their people. Tell me about these people. Tell me about Rebecca Norton. What do you like? What should you do well? What should I build upon? What are the things that you are yourself working on to improve Rebecca's skills? Those conversations are taking place now, and that's tremendously powerful. And it makes me reflect, Rebecca, that I don't do enough of this. I don't make even the effort to engage line managers in designed programs, and particularly from the outset.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting that they're being designed into this. So I take it that the line managers that you're working with are fully engaged in this, and it's not something that they've been pushed into.
Well, that I find out. Of course, I've been doing this 40 years. I've been working for myself for 30 years. I don't always believe the brief I'm given from a client. And as it's turned out, it's been very positive, and it really has. I can think of plenty of times over the last 30 or 40 years where it wouldn't have been, where you're told, yeah, talk to these line managers, they're well up for it. They want to, and they talk to them and say, what's this all about? I was only talking about it yesterday. My people haven't got time for this. But in this particular instance, it's been extremely positive, to the point where the programmed contacts I've had with line managers don't mean a thing, because I've got another meeting in China with meeting in China. Oh yes, I'm stepping onto the plane, and I'm talking to my computer with a guy in China who's the line manager of 3 of the people in China I'm working with, because they're all over the place. And that's the 3rd meeting with him, because he's so engaged, he's so interested. He wants to work out where my activity begins and ends, and his, as the operational manager, can work alongside. It's very encouraging for me. I like working this way.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant, and I think it is really useful to get line managers on board, isn't it? So you've touched a little bit on this, but what's their involvement in this? I mean, were they involved in sort of planning any of this project, or are they just involved in the project now it's started?
Well, it's a bit of a fait accompli for them, because their people were nominated. I don't really think entirely with them. It was more, Rebecca, you're in Sweden, your person, XYZ is going to be on this. I don't know, I might be doing a disservice, but I don't think they were massively involved. But of course, you raise a good issue. They should have been, because the more involved they are from an even earlier stage, the better. And yes, so their involvement is from a point of, this is the program, let's talk, rather than let's start putting the program together. But I'm working on the needs of their people. I haven't got a pre-prepared set of content delivery here. I was talking this morning about needs which are massively different from the guy I was talking to yesterday in North Carolina, who was the manager of someone else. And so it's really helping me say, don't just deliver this thinking of these as one type of human. They're very different humans, but very different contexts and needs. Some of them have an ambition to be managerial. Some of them do not, for who it'll be more of a personal development activity. It's great, because usually I find, I'm being honest here, you get a group of people into rooms and, hello everybody, never seen you before, let's talk about this. You never get to know about the line managers, you never know what their views about them are. And the line managers are critical stakeholders in this. In their hands lie the return on investment or not, because if they're obstructive, if they're difficult, they will put things in the way, like real work. If they're helpful, and if you're working in collaboration, it just makes things work.
Yeah, definitely. It's useful having them on board, isn't it? So are you working with line managers before you start working with the employees, or is this in line with, so have you already spoken to employees, or will that come next?
I'm speaking with line managers expressly in advance of contact with their people. And I'm making that clear from the start. I'm also making it clear that these conversations are sensitive, they're confidential, and they're between me and with all parties. And that helps. So I'm not speaking to any learners until I've spoken with their line managers. I just think that's protocol. I think that's politeness. And I think it respects the line managerial role in this.
And the employees or the learners are aware that you're having these conversations with line managers initially.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So it sounds like a really tailored approach, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Well, it's very generous of you to say. I actually feel quite pleased with myself, unusually, because yes, it was working. It was a very definite, deliberate, explicit thing to do. And fair play to the client. A lot of clients would say, no, that costs too much. Because after all, I charge a sum per hour. And it typically takes an hour for each of these. I've got 13 line management interviews to do. I'm looking at my chart on the wall there across the world. That takes time. Time costs money. So the client recognizes the value in this. And that's important too, because I think a lot of clients just wouldn't do that. If they're cost conscious over learning and value conscious, they'll say, no, just do it. And I say, okay, but it'll go so much better. You'll get so much more back if you do it this way.
So what do you see as the main benefits or advantages of having line managers in place with this project?
Oh no, the difficult question you promised that I wouldn't be ready for. I think the main advantages are respect. It shows respect. It's not just going through the motions. I explore issues in some depth. I get a lot of context. I got a lot of perspective that I wouldn't otherwise do. So you get all of that. I'm also seeing a secondary effect, because now I've talked with quite a few line managers. Some of them are saying to me, I could do some of this myself, or I think I need to give XYZ person some more coaching, or I should be in Gothenburg more often, which is what I got told by the Berlin line manager today of that person. And so it has a knock-on operational effect. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm some sort of wonderful person that causes whole organizations to ripple outwards and become wonderfully effective. But it is encouraging to see that it's welcomed by line managers, not resisted, that they engage in it positively and they see real value from it. I'm going to do more of this.
Yeah, brilliant. And I do think there's a lot of advantages, but let's look at the flip side of that. What challenges have you come across, or do you sort of expect to come across during this?
Well, I'm talking very rosily because I'm getting a rosy picture. I've got more line managers to catch up with, and I think they'll all be equally positive, to be honest, because I think that's why I'm getting across the organization. If I go back to past experiences of working with line managers, it hasn't always been that positive. And I think that's one of the reasons perhaps why I've resisted explicitly doing this as more often. I remember, for instance, when I've run end of program, end of year long projects with a monetary value on presentations. And I run these in Worcester for an energy company whose headquarters are off Junction 6, if anyone knows. All line managers of the dozen or so people were invited. And about 3 turn up, one of them from Leeds, which is great, and it's a bit like parents' evening and how many parents turn up and how many don't. So if it doesn't work well, it looks really bad, particularly if it's a physical event. I more recently ran a program management development program for a major hospital trust in London, in Brixton. That gives it away, I don't care. And line managers were invited. Again, it's very clear. It's a very explicit statement of I'm not here because I either can't be bothered or got more important things to do, from the I have found time to do this people. So if you invite line management interest, you don't always get it.
Yeah, so that's some of the challenges, isn't it? And I suppose maybe the challenge there is helping them to see what the benefits are of them being involved in this. What are the payoffs really that they're going to get by their involvement, because there are, they have, I suppose, by them showing up, it means that they've got some say in how it goes, really, haven't they, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess that's true. And all the line managers I'm speaking to, as I did today, I've said, look, let's not make this a one-off. Let's keep talking to each other. Let's get a dialogue going. And to be fair to the vice president I spoke today, it's an American company, so they got vice presidential terms, that sort of stuff. He said, look, at short term, I can find you 10, 15 minutes. We can talk about things. I think I love this. I'm actually working with people, not in the absence of them. But you're right. It is a bit of a punt. It doesn't always go right. And not every line manager is keen on this. And yeah, I take your point about selling it to them, but I don't think I should. If I've got to sell to a line manager the benefits of their involvement, then I'm deeply disappointed because I shouldn't have to.
So you've said that this company so far is being really positive in that all the line managers that you've spoken to already have been really willing to engage, and we've both admitted that, you know, that's not always going to be the case in some other organisations. So what do you think makes this organisation different?
Well, I don't know yet because I don't know it well enough. But again, that's a good question that deserves more reflection. I'm only given an immediate response. Well, I suppose I've caught it at the right time. There was a felt need for what I'm doing. Now, I didn't know that, and you find things out when you start engaging with people. So it seems like it's the right time for this. It's also not a vast organisation, although it's geographically diverse. It's not tens of thousands of people. So there is a degree of community still, and a lot of people have been there a long time. There's a real commitment within the organisation of a lot of the people I'm talking to who have worked in this organisation for 10, 12, 15 years. So they're not transients. I think that helps. There are lots of other reasons that I would think about in more detail, but it's a really good question. I don't have all the answers to that. Maybe I've just caught them at the right time, Rebecca.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's interesting to, I think that's something that's probably, like you say, it is worth reflecting on, because if it's something that you can identify, that's something that you can help other organisations identify as well. But I guess you mentioned there that there was a need. So what was that need, and who was it that identified that need?
Well, I'm finding that out too. And again, this is part of the value of the process, because traditionally you've only got one channel of finding these sorts of things out. It's the learners. It's what they tell you. And that, you know, I'm not saying learners tell fibs, but they tell you what you tell them. They tell you, and you don't get other perspectives. So the line management channel is giving me an interesting perspective. And that helps to form a basis for understanding what you're asking of me. But I guess I'm trying not to be authoritative about an answer to that, because in the case of this organisation, I just don't know yet. And it makes me realise with some humility the vast amount I don't know that can be helped by line manager input.
Yeah, and it is interesting, I suppose. Maybe where I was going with that is that, is this something that's been identified by sort of the top guy in terms of results or profits or staff turnover? Was there something that sort of highlighted that they needed some external involvement in this, or is that not something that you're aware of?
Oh yeah, I think there is a definite drive from the very chief executive level of the organisation, and that helps. So it's well recognised that that singular person wants this to happen, which is great. That really does help. And that then is filtered down and and I see the commitment by others near to that level in the hierarchy and throughout. It's an organisation that welcomes what I'm doing, and that also doesn't always happen. So maybe what's happening here, Rebecca, is a bit of a confluence. That's a good word, isn't it? It's a geographical word. A coming together of stuff that says the right time for an organisation which is welcoming to this and for which is being championed from the top. There's a lot of very positive factors here. And the key thing is, let's be realistic. Those factors won't always exist. And line managers in a different set of circumstances where those things aren't happening will likely to be resistant.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. That is, if you've got buy-in right from the top down does make a difference, because they have an influence on the culture of an organisation, don't they? And perhaps that's why line managers are receptive to it, because of the culture right from the top of the organisation.
Yeah, it is, but it's got to be the right sort of commitment, because if the head of an organisation, I've worked in one like this, is basically saying, we're going to do this, and everybody else says, yeah, okay, but we don't really want to, but we'll do it because you told us to. What I'm getting is a different vibe. Yes, we want to do this, and we're glad you're saying this, because we've wanted to do this for a long time. Now, again, I'm not saying that the circumstances I am are typical. They've not been typical very often of where I've done work in the past. And I don't think it's typical engagement, commitment, and interest. It's just great to be in a situation where that is happening. And it's giving me greater will to at least seek to do more of that in the future.
Brilliant. So what would you say to other organisations who are perhaps considering getting line managers involved?
Do it. Do it, but don't do it without briefing them. because I've still had to start all of my line management discussions with, what can I tell you about this? And it's usually, well, just about everything. so do it, brief people, and don't just do it as a one-off. Seek to create a channel of continuous, but not continual communication, so that the dialogue's open, so that I can make contact with a line manager that I've already got a relation with and say, I'm hitting this problem with your person so-and-so. What can you help me with this? And trust them to have that conversation in confidence and in a way that is a helping conversation, rather than something they can hit people in the head with disciplinarily, which is what I've experienced in the past sometimes. And that's why I wouldn't involve line management. I don't trust them. So if I don't trust line management to do what I consider the right thing, that's another reason not to engage with them. I'm not getting that vibe where I am now, but I can think of organizations in the past where I thought this would never work there because these line managers are untrustworthy.
Yeah, so there's a few factors at play here, isn't there? But it sounds like it's a really good opportunity to almost experiment with a few things here and actually see where this leads.
Absolutely. Maybe next week when I've had 3 more, I think, what I was saying last week, Rebecca, forget all that. I've just had contact with 3 line managers who are terrible. I don't think so. But there's lots of issues here, and they might seem obvious. They might seem common sense. I'm a 40-year person in learning development, and it's making me ask myself very fundamentally, why haven't I done this more often?
All right, brilliant. I will leave you to reflect on that one then.
And I will, thank you.